Abortion rights supporters in Kansas are celebrating this morning. Voters there struck down a proposed constitutional amendment that would have allowed the state legislature to ban abortions. They rejected the measure nearly 60 to 40%. Now, this is the first referendum on the issue since the Supreme Court struck down Roe versus Wade. Caitlin Huey-Burns is near Kansas City this morning. Caitlin, good morning.
Hey, good morning, David. Well, it was kind of a surprise vote here in Kansas. Many people were surprised at the results because Kansas is a very conservative state. Donald Trump won here by nearly 14 points in the 2020 election, but turnout was extremely high, setting a historic number compared to the last midterm primary. And voters were registering their support for keeping abortion access in Kansas.
A resounding victory for abortion rights supporters in a conservative state.
I feel like my state just showed up and boldly told me that they are going to take care of me.
Kansas voters rejected a ballot measure that would have eliminated constitutional protections for abortion in the state, a move that would have allowed the Republican legislature to further restrict or enact a near ban on the procedure.
Is this the end? Can the legislature do anything on this issue?
I think it might be a while before we get another bite at the apple.
It was the first time voters had a direct say on the issue since Roe v. Wade was overturned, and turnout was significantly higher than expected for a primary contest in the state at 47%.
What was at stake was our constitutional rights and our freedom. And so, a coalition of voters across the political spectrum came together today and voted no.
Abortion rights supporters hope the win reverberates beyond Kansas.
And if you can see that the no votes win here, then that would mean that you could have that in any part of the country, no matter how red it is.
So what happens here in Kansas could be a roadmap for other states.
It is a roadmap for how do we make sure that we're asserting, defending, and protecting the rights of women to have access to care in any part of the country.
Now, while voters here in Kansas voted to protect abortion rights, at the federal level, President Joe Biden is expected to sign an executive order today to expand access to abortion access. David?
Caitlin, is the vote there binding? In other words, could it be broken in any way, the decision of the voters last night?
Well, this was a significant vote because this was the first time that voters actually were able to weigh in, and they were voting on an amendment to the state's constitution. So this essentially means that the laws in place now are going to continue to be the laws. You heard the state legislature in our piece essentially say it's going to be a while before the state legislature can try to do anything like this again. Just to give a little bit of context, to get this ballot measure out there, it took about 2 years for the state legislature to be able to pass that, to get that on the ballot. And so this would, essentially keep the restrictions that are already in place here up to 22 weeks and some other measures in place. And if it were to have passed last night, it would have allowed the state legislature to enact further restrictions if they wanted to.
I heard someone say, and I want to get your take on this, I heard someone say last night, this doesn't necessarily mean that a Republican red state like Kansas all of a sudden has a huge number of pro-choice people. This could mean that you have some pro-life folks who went and voted no, because even this measure for pro-life folks was just a little too extreme. Are you hearing that? What's the analysis that you're hearing?
Well, if you look at the numbers here, this is a conservative state. Republicans outnumber Democrats, and they're also unaffiliated voters. But what we kept hearing from voters at the polls yesterday was that they were turning out for this issue alone. Essentially, we talked to some voters who said that they didn't even look at what else was on the ballot. They were coming out for this issue specifically. So that tells us a couple of different things. It tells us that this is an issue that very much animates voters, and that's something that Democrats were looking for, some data points heading into the midterm elections, how they could galvanize their supporters. But it also shows that this is something that can attract independent voters and also maybe some Republican voters. but on this issue. Now, it remains to be seen whether, when other items are on the ballot, when other candidates are on the ballot, does that transfer to Democratic candidates? That really wasn't what was at play here. This was a ballot issue. You were coming out to vote yes or no on the abortion rights issue. I think there are some open questions about what this means when other candidates are on the ballot. In other words, if you voted to protect abortion rights here, does that mean you're going to vote for the Democratic candidate in November? That still is an open question. But it does show that mobilizing supporters, a strategic message can be effective.
Any other states right now considering similar ballot measures regarding abortion?
There are a couple other states that are going to have ballot measures in November, either to preserve rights or overturn them. But Kansas kind of was a unique situation because we've seen across the country that state legislatures have been able to act. Texas, for example, others have been able to put laws in place without having a constitutional amendment. But the state Supreme Court here a couple of years ago ruled that the abortion law that the legislature was trying to pass at that time was infringing upon the state constitution. That was their interpretation. State Supreme Courts vary across states. State legislatures vary across states. So there, is a roadmap for other states in terms of galvanizing, organizing, having a clear message. But some of the dynamics here were unique to Kansas.
Look, the Supreme Court said when they overturned Roe v. Wade, this should be left up to the voters. And the voters in Kansas decided.
Exactly.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you very much.
That's exactly what was at play.